Okay, so picture this for a second. You're sitting on a train. The landscape is just, I don't know, blurring past the window in a smear of brown and green. You're heading to Baghdad. It's a long, monotonous journey. And, well, you're bored out of your mind. There's no Wi-Fi, no phone to doom scroll on, just the rhythmic clatter of the tracks. And sitting across from you is an elderly sheik, a man with this weathered face and eyes that look like they've seen about, 3 lifetimes of history. He notices you staring at the ceiling, leans in, and pulls out this handwritten manuscript. He tells you it's a story about a stranger who arrived in their city 30 years ago, a stranger who he claims carried the secret to world peace.
That is a fantastic hook. I mean, it feels like the start of a magical realism novel or some classic adventure story.
Right, but what you're actually describing is the opening frame of a very serious, very fascinating political text.
It is.
And that's the setup for today's deep dive. We are looking at a manuscript called Al-Jumhuriyya al-Alamiyya, which translates to the Global Republic.
Authored by Abdul Jabbar Al-Waili, roughly back in the 1970s.
And I have to say, when I first picked this up, I was expecting, a dusty political science textbook, charts, dry theory, the whole thing. But this is, well, it's weirdly gripping.
It's a hybrid. It's this genre-bending mix of survivalist fiction, think Robinson Crusoe or Life of Pi,
Okay.
and it's mashed up with a dense utopian political manifesto.
Which honestly is a pretty clever way to get people to eat their vegetables, so to speak.
Exactly.
You think you're reading a story about shipwrecks and secret islands, and then suddenly you're deep in the weeds of constitutional law.
Al-Waili uses the narrative as a kind of Trojan horse.
Hmm.
He captures your imagination with the adventure so your defenses are down when he starts proposing frankly, some radical changes to how human society should be governed.
He creates a miniature model.
A miniature model of the world to show us where we're going wrong.
So let's get into the story before we dive into the politics, because the story itself is actually pretty intense. We have this narrator on the train listening to the sheikh.
And the sheik starts telling the tale of a merchant. Let's just call him the stranger.
Okay.
The stranger is a merchant traveling from India to China. And the text gives us a very specific geographical anchor point. His ship runs into a violent storm near the Suez Canal.
And the description of the shipwreck is just terrifying. It's not just, oh, the ship sank. It's visceral.
It is.
The manuscript describes him clinging to a lifeboat, the sun keeling his skin, the thirst, the hallucinations. Why spend so much time on the suffering? Is that just for drama?
I don't think so. I mean, that desperation is a crucial device. It strips the character of his old identity. When you are dying of thirst on a raft, you aren't a merchant or a citizen of a specific nation or a member of a class. You're just a human being, desperate for safety. It resets the board.
So he's a blank slate, and eventually he washes up on an island. He hides his boat because he's terrified of savages.
A classic trope.
Right. But when he creeps inland, he doesn't find people with spears in a jungle. He finds a civilized, isolated world.
This is the hidden world. The manuscript describes an archipelago of 119 islands.
And that number, 119, feels very specific.
It is. It represents the number of nations in existence, roughly around the time the author was thinking about this. It's a closed system.
And the kicker is that the people there believe they are the only people in existence. They think their archipelago is the entire universe, and the ocean beyond them is just the endless ocean.
It's a complete lost world scenario. But the society Al-Waili builds is incredibly specific and a little baffling. It's anachronistic.
Yeah.
On the one hand, they have iron factories, textile mills, complex irrigation. But on the other hand, they fight with swords and arrows and horses.
I got stuck on that part. It just didn't make sense to me. If you can build a factory, you can definitely build a gun, so why the mismatch?
I think it highlights a disparity we often ignore, that moral and social progress doesn't always keep pace with industrial capability.
So your tech advances, but your mindset doesn't.
Or perhaps he's suggesting that even with industry, their way of thinking is still, medieval. But notice what else he emphasizes: their culture of work.
Right.
In this society, labor is sacred. A blacksmith is held in the same high regard as a wealthy merchant.
It sounded a little bit like propaganda, to be honest. This idea that the rich build schools and hospitals voluntarily, not because of taxes, but just because it's a social honor. Does that feel like realistic human behavior to you?
Well, in the context of the story, it establishes these islanders as fundamentally good people. He's trying to remove the variable of evil or greed from the equation.
Okay, I see.
They value education, they revere teachers, and while they have 3 different monotheistic religions, the text emphasizes their shared belief in a creator. They aren't savages. And yet,
when the stranger tells them, hey, I come from a place with billions of people and massive continents, they look at him like he's lost his mind.
they dismiss his reality as madness because it contradicts their entire worldview. It's a commentary on how hard it is to accept new paradigms. But here is the crux of the problem. Despite their goodness, despite their work ethic and their charity, this archipelago is a mess.
Right, because these 119 islands aren't, holding hands and singing songs. They're divided. Some are monarchies, some are republics, and they have their own version of a great war. The stranger witnesses a conflict that lasts 4 years, destroys cities, and kills 30,000 people.
And 30,000 people in a small archipelago is a demographic catastrophe. It's their version of World War I.
Yeah.
And just like our world after WWI, the islands look at the carnage and say, never again.
So they form what they call the Global Association.
Which feels like a direct stand-in for the League of Nations, or maybe the early UN.
It has to be.
It is a direct mirror. And, spoiler alert, it fails.
Yeah.
Miserably.
Okay, let's dig into why it fails. Because usually we hear, oh, the League of Nations failed because it didn't have the U.S. or other specific historical reasons. What's Al-Waili's diagnosis here?
His diagnosis is structural. He argues the Global Association failed because it was fundamentally a confederation, not a government. It was controlled by the great powers, the large island nations.
So they set the rules.
But they didn't have to follow them.
And there's that specific incident in the text, the Holy Village, that really illustrates this point.
Island 51.
Right, Island 51, a peaceful religious center, population of about 10,000. They don't have a standing army. They're totally neutral. And then a neighboring island just decides to occupy them.
Just walks in and takes over. A clear case of aggression.
So the people of Island 51 appeal to the Global Association. They say, look, we're being occupied. This is against the charter. Help us.
And what happens?
Nothing.
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 Paralysis. Because the aggressor was a powerful ally of one of the bigger islands in the association, the great powers blocked any meaningful action. They issued statements, maybe sent a sternly worded letter, but no real intervention.
That sounds infuriatingly familiar.
It proved to the stranger that the system was broken. Think of the Global Association, like a homeowners association, an HOA.
Okay.
The HOA can send you a nasty letter if your grass is too long. They can complain, but they can't arrest you. They don't have a police force. They rely on you agreeing to follow the rules.
And if you're the biggest guy on the block and you decide you're not going to follow the rules, the HOA can't do a thing.
Precisely. Al-Waili is saying that as long as international justice is voluntary or subject to the whims of the powerful, the weak will always be devoured. The law is just a suggestion.
So the system collapses. War looms again. And this is where the stranger steps up. He's worked his way up to being an advisor to the president of Island 1, and he proposes this radical solution. He says, stop trying to patch up the association. You need a global republic.
And this is where the manuscript shifts. It goes from being a story to being a constitutional blueprint.
Okay, so let's look at this blueprint, because he's not just talking about holding hands. He's talking about a federal union. What does that actually mean for the islands?
It means a surrender of sovereignty. He proposes that every island retains its local autonomy for things like education, traffic laws, local culture.
Sure.
But they must surrender control of two things to the central global government: defense and foreign policy.
Whoa, hold on. Defense? So he's saying the islands have to give up their armies.
Yes, total disarmament of the individual states. No standing armies for Island 5 or Island 90. Only the Global Republic has a military, and its sole purpose is to enforce federal law.
I have to play devil's advocate here. If I'm the king of Island 10, why on earth would I agree to that? If I give up my army, I'm defenseless. If the Global Republic decides to crush me, I have no recourse.
That is the primary objection, and it's why this is so hard to achieve in reality. But Al-Waili's counter-argument is the Holy Village. He'd say, you kept your army and look what happened. You still had war, you still had occupation.
Right.
He argues that national sovereignty, in its absolute form, is a suicide pact.
So under this system, if Island A attacks Island B, it's not a war anymore.
No, it's a crime. It becomes a police matter. The central government arrests the leaders of Island A just like they would arrest a bank robber. You don't negotiate with a murderer, you arrest them.
Okay, but for that to work, you have to trust the people running the Global Republic. Who runs this thing? Because if it's just the big islands in charge again, we're right back to the HOA problem.
That is the million-dollar question. And Al-Waili proposes a parliament, but with a unique twist to balance power. He divides the 119 islands into categories: small, medium, and large states based on population.
Okay, so a bit like the U.S. House of Representatives.
A little, but he fixes the representation. He sets it up so the large states cannot simply outvote the small states by sheer numbers. The small states get a disproportionately larger voice than their population might suggest to ensure they aren't bullied.
But how do they pick the people? Is it just an election?
This is where it gets really interesting and maybe a little controversial. He proposes a mix of elections and lotteries.
Wait, lotteries, like pulling names out of a hat to run the world?
Essentially, yes.
That sounds insane. You're going to trust global security policy to some person whose name just happened to come up in a raffle. What if they're incompetent or chaotic?
Well, look at the alternative. The argument, which actually dates back to ancient Athens, is that elections are easily manipulated. They can be bought by money or swayed by charisma and demagoguery. A lottery, in theory, ensures you get people who aren't power-hungry sociopaths. You get normal people.
I guess that's fair. You take the ego out of it, but you still need competence.
True, which is why the manuscript lists very specific requirements for anyone who wants to be in the pool for this parliament. You must be over 30. You must have a completely clean criminal record. And you cannot be a sectarian extremist.
He also mentions possessing a broad mind and conscience. That feels incredibly subjective. I mean, who decides if my mind is broad enough?
It is subjective, and that's a weakness in the text.
Yeah.
It implies some sort of vetting committee, which, brings its own dangers. But the intent is clear. He wants global citizens running the show, not narrow-minded nationalists who are only there to loot the treasury for their home island.
And what about the head honcho? The president?
A rotating presidency, elected by the parliament, but it shifts. No single island or region can hold the presidency for consecutive terms. This prevents a dynasty or a dictatorship from ever taking root at the global level.
So the stranger lays all this out. The federal union, the parliament, the disarmament. How do the islanders in the story react? Do they throw him a parade?
Hardly. It's a massive, massive hard sell. Remember, these are nations that have been sovereign for centuries. The local kings and presidents are terrified of losing their power.
But the alternative is the destruction of their world.
And that's the cliffhanger the society faces. Al-Waili is showing us that the logic is sound. A global republic would stop war, but the psychological barrier of giving up my tribe's power is almost impossible to overcome.
It's wild to think this was written in the 1970s. It feels like it could have been written today or in 1919 or 1945. It's this timeless struggle between the desire for peace and the desire for control.
It really is. And if we zoom out and look at the author's intent, I mean, why write this as a story? Why not just write a manifesto?
Yeah, why bother with the sheik on the train and the shipwreck and all that?
I think Al-Waili understood that politics triggers our defenses. If he started talking about the USA and the USSR and the Cold War directly, readers in the 70s would immediately take sides. Oh, I'm with the Americans, or I'm with the Soviets.
Right, you stop listening to the idea and start defending your team.
Exactly. But no one has a patriotic allegiance to Island 7 or Island 40. By stripping away the real-world labels, he forces us to see the mechanics of the system.
So we see the injustice.
We see the injustice of the Holy Village occupation clearly, because we aren't biased by real-world politics.
And then once we agree that, hey, the global association in the story is unfair, he traps us. Because we have to admit that our world works the exact same way.
It's a mirror. The islands are us. The endless ocean is space. We are stuck on this planet, this archipelago of continents, and we are acting just like those islanders, fighting over scraps, while ignoring the fact that we are all in the same boat.
Or the same lifeboat, to use the castaway metaphor. It really challenges the way we look at a map. We see borders as these rigid, real things, but from the perspective of the stranger, they're just lines in the sand that we're willing to kill each other for.
And that's the power of the global republic concept. It posits that war isn't some inevitable part of human nature. It argues that war is a result of faulty political architecture. If you fix the architecture, if you move from the HOA model to the municipal government model, you fix the problem.
It's a beautiful, if somewhat daunting vision. The idea that we could evolve past the need for war by simply is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, but by changing how we organize ourselves.
It is daunting. But every major political shift in history, from tribes to city-states, from city-states to nations, seemed impossible until it happened. Al-Waili is asking, what's the next step?
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Al-Jamhuriya, Al-Amiyya, I keep going back to that image of the sheikh on the train. handing over this blueprint for a better world to a bored traveler. It feels like he's handing it to us.
It's a hopeful image. It implies that the idea is out there, traveling, waiting for someone to pick it up and really understand it.
So here's the thought we want to leave you with today, and it's a bit of a mind bender. Imagine for a second that we, the people of Earth, are just like those islanders. We think our borders are the edge of the world. But if we zoomed out and viewed the entire planet as a single archipelago in a vast universe, would a global republic still feel like a crazy, dangerous utopian dream? Or would it start to look like the only logical survival strategy we have left?
That is the question.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.